Yeah,
so to build on to that and to kind of come back from a different angle. So the biggest criticism of the record industry, of the movie industry, of the newspaper industry and the magazine industries have all been, okay, there's this thing that no one really saw a while ago called the internet. Took everyone blindsided. And they kind of reacted too late, right? And everyone says, in retrospect, all of these industries had a really great opportunity to create a symbiotic relationship, to embrace the internet, to embrace small indie communities or people working from distance, and they didn't. They looked at it as a us versus them mentality, said, okay, well, these are the assets we have, these are the traditions we have, how do we leverage that to now compete with this new market? Everyone said, well, you should have never done that, right? You should have embraced them, you should have created a symbiotic relationship, and then you'd be in a much better space. So you can say, okay, the movie industry should have embraced YouTube, or the record industry should have embraced MySpace. And even in, one of your slides that they've got you, Clayton, you have it. You have like the us versus them. And I think the mentality is still that. How does the brick and mortar compete with the virtual? How do professors compete with forums and communities? Instead of saying, well, how do we create a symbiotic relationship with that? What is 2030 in a virtual stance? And then how do we align ourselves with that? And how do we make ourselves quintessential to that new model? And that's what I guess I haven't really heard too much, which is, well, instead of saying we need to be the dominant force, and then we need to be able to push off this other force, why not say, okay, well, how do we be subservient to this other force? Like, if the internet's not going to go away, or how do we create a better unison that would not exist without one or the other?
So since I'm Mr. Negative up here, I'll respond to that. So I would say that it's neither accident nor incompetence that all those industries did just what you said. And I'd say it's neither accident nor incompetence that we're likely to approach it in exactly the same way. And that's because, actually, one of the things that Jonathan talks about here is that, and actually it's in the Blown to Bits book, the time when an industry is most vulnerable is when it's doing the best. Okay, because it has the most to lose by changing what it's doing. But leaving aside sort of, when you're especially vulnerable, the fact is that the university, so actually here's a little vignette from when I was department chair. So some of my colleagues could boo and hiss if they want to. But one of the things I tried to do was to get our faculty to focus on our role of shaping the lives of young people. And I had a very respected colleague say, that's not why I came here. Okay? So the fact is, we have a bunch of people here that have come here to do the thing that there is to do. And so the people who administer the university are thinking about, what to do with who we have and how to meet their aspirations and all that kind of stuff. Actually, I just read some stuff last night about the history of Kodak, which is actually somewhat different from what I had imagined. So it's not that Kodak was sort of asleep at the switch and digital photography sort of blindsided them. They actually lost a boatload of money in their efforts to actually do just what you're saying, of merging digital photography with film photography. They had a lot of, now what seems like totally bizarre ideas about how to do that, most of which involved going from film to digital and stuff like that, right? But why were they doing this? So first of all, they were sort of trying to do some of these things, but it also demonstrates it's really hard because you are who you are, and you can't just say, well, tomorrow I'm going to be someone different. Yeah.
And to follow on that, there's a lot of examples out there where you can look at the dominant industry not being the one that creates the new innovation. They have a market, they have money coming in, even if it's not as much as it needs to be. And it's very difficult for them to go and say, well, we're going to get rid of that market that we know it's sustainable to some degree and try this new thing that we have no idea if it's going to work. So often in the innovation in industries comes from smaller outside players. and then those dominant players come back and kind of incorporate that into their fold. Mountain bikes is a great example. Mountain bikes didn't come from the biking industry. It came from small people who kind of wanted to play and do things different than what the biking industry allowed them to do on their bikes. And so just kind of, hobbyists created mountain bikes, and then the mountain biking community kind of got formed. And then the big companies came in and said, oh, there's a profit to be made here, and we're going to start making mountain bikes as well. And there's a lot of areas where that same model has happened. And so we might actually be in a case where the same thing's going to happen for education, for higher education. There's going to be these open universities and these community colleges and online institutions that get formed and created and try and do something different than what we're doing. And then we realize at a later time, oh, we need to be doing that now, and we're going to kind of jump on board and take control of it. Possibility.
Yeah. But again, so the record industry analogy doesn't totally map on them, because the record industry really had nothing in place. As long as we have something in place that is distance learning and online learning and all that, it's as if the record companies, when iTunes was coming out, had their own version of iTunes, and they could just watch it and they could say, okay, well, at some point now our iTunes version is winning, so now we have to focus there. Like something like the New York Times did a pretty successful transition, even though I think they might start charging now, from print to online media, where they say, okay, well, we have this print media, we have this online one, we have this print one, let's just look at the numbers and see what they like. And now we're positioned to be able to go this way.
Yeah.
Don't we have that ability here, like already?
Well, we have it to a small extent. We have it to pretty much zero extent at the undergrad level. We have it to a greater extent at the grad level. But there are other institutions that have it more. So, and actually, it'll be interesting. Actually, I don't know who one would point to among conventional higher education institutions that's in the best position to take advantage of what you're doing. Partly, there was a wave of interest in online higher education because people thought they could make a lot of money from it. And then when people found out they couldn't make a lot of money from it, they largely backed off. And so I don't know who's in place that's doing a lot of it, particularly at the undergrad level. But there may be some institutions, but I'd suggest we are not one of them.
It seems too that, a big issue is the cost of what we provide here, and to compete we need to lower that cost, it seems. And what's required to lower the cost is to cut back on our resources, whether it be faculty or buildings or expenses that go on with this huge university right now. So, if we want to, or if the university wants to move itself into a more competitive position or more symbiotic position or whatever, it seems like ultimately that reduction has to happen.
Well, actually, that brings up a really interesting point. So, one of the top concerns for this institution in the here and now is shortage of classroom space. Okay, so what's happening is, and one of the things that's happening is that in order to try to offset shortfalls in state funding, we're increasing enrollment. That's one of the things that we're still able to do. And if we increase enrollment with out-of-state students, we actually make money off that. So we do that, and some of you are experiencing it. Well, so classes are getting bigger, and now there's a shortage of bigger classrooms. Okay, so operationally, sort of in keeping the wheels turning mode, we're likely to be investing in more classroom buildings, right? But against the background of what we're talking about here, that's not going to help. So it's an example of where we're kind of caught, right? So again, I don't think it's because people are stupid or careless or anything, but people are mainly concerned with, again, how do we keep things on a reasonably even keel, and the way we're doing things leads to certain kinds of demands, and we feel the need to sort of satisfy those. But you look at the alternative, and you might say, well, we're finding ourselves in a position of having made investments in the wrong things.